What's up, guys? Finally got around to improving the ride quality on my Pioneer 1000. These are some cheapo shocks. They're kind of like the Fox ones that come on the high-end versions of the Pioneer 1000 that have the stupid four-wheel drive and stuff. But these are dirt cheap, and they're a lot softer spring rate and softer valving, I believe, than the factory shocks. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Consider joining the Patreon page. A lot of this information, these informational videos, really only end up on Patreon. I had enough requests for this one to make it public on YouTube. But yeah. Super cheap shock swap. Check the description for links and part numbers and stuff like that. Alright guys, the old Pioneer 1000 is getting some love. This thing's been an absolute workhorse. I use the crap out of it, but one thing I've always hated is how stiff the rear suspension is. They put a really big bed on it, so they put really stiff springs so you could load it down. I don't put much more than a cooler and some crates back there, so I don't really need the crazy bed capacity. I'd much rather have a better ride. Marshall Mims, he's got a YouTube channel, came across these super cheap Cayman shocks for the back of the Pioneer. I think they were like, I don't know, 150 a piece maybe. Super cheap. And they're marketed to be a Pioneer 1005 shock. So you can see they look a little different. What I'm excited about is the coil springs are smaller diameter. They're fully threaded for adjustability. I don't really care about the remote reservoir, but it is a real remote reservoir. I don't know if they're charged to the right pressure or anything like that. I mean, they are a very cheap generic shock. Same shocks being sold by Monster. But I'm just going to see if they ride any softer than the OEM shocks. As far as length, they're the same extended length. Compressed length, probably about the same too. I'd have to pull them apart and remove this sleeve to get a really good measurement. I'll take some approximate measurements on compressed and extended length, just kind of estimating from the bump stop to the bottom of the shock body. But it's probably going to be similar to factory. What I'm excited about though is the coil diameter. So these shocks have a coil diameter of about 12.5, and the OEM shocks have a coil diameter of about 13.15. So to me that says it should be a little softer spring rate. I know the metal's probably different, but yeah. So I'm putting 5-seater shocks on the back of my 3-seater because there's no 3-seater shocks available that are remotely cheap. The bushings aren't as high quality. They're just like kind of plastic insert bushings versus the nice Honda double mounted one, so that sucks. I'll definitely keep my Honda shocks around in case these bushings drive me crazy. They are adjustable. There's 2 positions. There's a soft and a hard position. Left is soft, I believe. So, you know, maybe they'll ride softer. We'll see. These Honda shocks are pretty puny though, so hopefully it's an upgrade. Yeah. So let me get the tape measure out and I'll take some approximate compressed lengths and extended lengths. Extended length looks the same, but we'll measure it all the same. Okay, so these shocks are advertised as long travel, but of course they're not. They match factory dimensions. They're about 20 inches long and they have about 6 inches of travel in the shock body. You do the motion ratio on here. This shock mounts pretty close to the knuckle with these CFAB arms and the factory arms. So realistically, you're probably at like, I don't know, 8 or 9 inches of rear travel. I think Honda says it's like 11. I don't remember. I did all the specs on this thing a long time ago when I first bought it. I was planning to put Armac shocks on it, but they went on back order and never got them. So it's been running the stock shocks. Regardless, these shocks aren't going to give you a whole lot more suspension travel. What they should do is help you have a little softer ride with the kind of progressive spring wind and all that stuff. So yeah, don't expect it to be a flexing machine with these shocks and stock shock mounts. They're not going to give you a real lift unless you crank the preload up. That bolted up very easy. Reservoir points towards the back. And yeah, bolted up just like factory. Plenty of clearance around everything that I can tell. I'm going to set the shock in the soft position and go test it out. Alright, so the shocks are on there with the Aztex tires. And the sag is about 1 inch more than the factory shocks had, set at their max preload position. So I'll probably run them like this one ride, let the springs break in, and then I will go ahead and crank up the preload a little bit because, yeah, I lost about 1 inch of ground clearance static, and I know they're going to break in and drop some more. But if you look at the springs, you will remember that it had some space between the coils at the top. Now those coils are all but touching. Pretty interesting. So there is some kind of progressive to the spring as those coils going to go coil bound. Basically your spring rate effectively gets a little higher. So I'm not really sure how that's going to help, but it might. Something kind of like a dual spring rate maybe. I don't know. Only one way to find out, and that is to test it. But the preload's backed almost all the way off. There's plenty of adjustment to crank up and get the ground clearance I need. I just need to go test it out and see if I'm bottoming out the rear, and I probably will be the way I drive, so I'll crank it up a little bit more. One of the reasons the Pioneer rides so bad is that I have these giant spring spacers up front. So with these new CFAB arms I put on there, I have hardly any down travel. That's about where it sits with the weight on it. I had maybe an inch of down travel. So now that I have these new shocks, I can fine tune the preload and get it to where I have about 2 inches of down travel. And that's gonna drastically improve the ride on this thing. Really, for best ride, the front's gonna have probably 9 inches of travel overall. I really should have 3 inches of sag. Usually want about 33% sag. But, you know, that's a trade-off. Do you want the ground clearance? Do you want the ride quality? Yada, yada, yada. All right, front shock comparison, much like the rear, both the same length, 19 3/4 inches long, eye to eye, and about 6 inches of travel if you ignore the bump stop. So 6 inches assuming the bump stop goes to full compressed. Coil diameter, 12.15. And OEM coil diameter, 13.06. So should have a softer spring rate, hopefully some softer valving, hopefully it'll ride great. Let's throw them in here. One thing to note is that these CFAB arms misalign the shock mount with the frame mount up here, so the shock's got to come twisted forward a little bit. These plastic bushings will not like that very much. These OEM rubber bushings didn't care. So that's kind of a slight issue. I'm sure these bushings will start squeaking at some point. As I anticipated, this is a problem. The shock can't come forward far enough for these stupid CFAB arms. Not the shock's fault necessarily. These CFAB arms are kind of crap in a lot of different ways. But, you know, this shock doesn't have the same compliance in the bushings as OEM, to say the least. So, not sure what I'm going to do here. Probably have to drill out the holes in the top shock mount a little bit to allow me to twist the bolt forward some more, because you don't want to put that much bind on a shock. That is just not healthy for its operation. Very annoying. Thank you, CFAB. It's gonna be really fun to get a burr up in here. Also, a warning about Eastlake ball joints. That amount of play is after 2 rides. Absolute crap. Doming at the top. I will never buy another Eastlake product. I got the front springs on, and just like the rear, I lost about an inch, maybe in the front I lost about 1.5 inches of ride height. Now, of course, I had big spring spacers on the front, so that's pretty understandable. But these springs definitely are going to have more sag than factory, which is okay. You can tell the spring is just a softer spring rate all the way around. So I think they're going to ride pretty good. Now, I wish the front were a little longer, so I may end up swapping out the front with some shocks from another UTV at some point. Obviously, I'm no stranger to swapping shocks on things. P5 has Polaris shocks on it, etc. I do it all the time. But yeah, so I'm sitting about 1.5 inches lower in the front and 1 inch lower in the rear. It's kind of leveled out actually, because I had the spring spacers on the front before. Doesn't look as mean, but I know it's going to ride a whole lot better because now it has some actual down travel in the front. When you adjust these shocks, the preload adjusters are way up in here. I would just recommend removing the shock, adjust them on the bench. It'll save you time busting up your knuckles working in the fenders. You can get these shocks off super fast, especially if you have one of these. It makes it so nice, the high-speed Milwaukee electric ratchet. If you're going to buy one of these, make sure to get this part number right here, 2567-20. The older one and cheaper ones are not nearly as powerful. But yeah, there she sits. Definitely looks like it needs some alignment work. Pioneer 1000 did awesome today. The new cheapo Amazon shocks did awesome. I can't believe I didn't break them. I was really beating on this thing with these super aggressive tires. It went through some holes that no 30 should ever be able to get through, honestly, and it tore through it very impressively. It actually outpulled some much bigger side-by-sides. All right, so the shocks. This is a post-ride update. Did Rancho yesterday. A lot of roots, stumps, rocks, whoops, and these shocks perform very good for being $120, $130 a piece. These are the Amazon Cayman shocks. Super impressed with them. Big improvement in ride quality. Mainly they're just not as stiff. So the suspension articulates more when you're trail riding. When you go to, climb a bank, they flex out more. Obviously the rear doesn't flex that much because of the sway bar, but the front flex is really nice. I still have the sway bar in the rear on this model. I do have CFAB arms, so that's a slight difference where the shock mounts are, but it's mostly factory geometry. I didn't even crank the preload up. They're all factory preload settings. Soft on the clickers, that would be hard. That would be soft. To the left, loosen is soft, I believe. So yeah, shocks are a good buy. Pioneer did great yesterday at Rancho. Absolutely beat the crap out of it on these Aztex tires. It climbed up some insane stuff. Really had a good time with it yesterday. I love this machine. It's so much fun. It's so versatile. It's maneuverable. It fits down most trails. It's got a big bed, and it's just a blast to drive. And now with these shocks, it's a lot more comfortable. So I think these shocks are a good upgrade. They'll probably double in price after I make this video. So before I make this video public, I'm going to go order me another set of them just to have on the shelf while they're still cheap. Because every time I make a video about a product that I like, the price skyrockets because they realize, oh, this is a decent product. So I don't know who actually developed these shocks or who made them. They're being sold by Monster, Cayman, maybe a few other brands. Same part numbers. You can see where they've like painted over the part numbers on the shock bodies right there and rebranded them. So I don't know who's actually making them. They're definitely a pretty decent product for the price though. So a pro tip for you guys, this video's been on the Patreon page for a while, but I did have some issues with the Pioneer when I got it home from this last ride. The fuse box was very corroded. So keep an eye on that, clean out your fuses. Tips and tricks like that are always on the Patreon page. I put them in videos when I remember, but I don't remember very often. So that's what's good about Patreon. When I come across something like that, that'll save people time. I post it on Patreon right away. That way those guys get the feedback. It doesn't get lost in the sauce because I forget things. What's up, guys? Just to put some information out there about my sponsors and stuff. Terache Tires has a bunch of new parts coming out. We're going to add some more combos. So there's 2 combos on the screen right here. You can save some money if you buy tires and wheels or tires and a gear reduction at the same time. We're also going to make combos with the axles and the wheel spacers and all the other parts we have coming out. Also, if you're going to buy anything from Vessel Power Sports, I can save you 10% with my promo code right there. And of course, if you like this kind of stuff, check out the Patreon page. I post on there daily tips and trick videos, answering questions, stuff like that.